Germans of Reddit, what cultural and linguistic differences are there between former East and West Germany?
I was born and still live in East Germany, so maybe I can give a perspective about my home region. And #X200B, as far as linguistic differences go, not much happened. The dialects were already there before the wall was built. People in the GDR often learned Russian as their second language. But most people I know forgot almost all Russian learned in school. And #X200B, cultural. Well, that's a lot, to be honest. East Germany has a lot less religious people, a lot of the architecture is still the plain Soviet style, people in East Germany see themselves as hard-working and friendly, there is a stereotype of West Germans being arrogant and lazy. East Germany is poorer than West Germany. Not only do people often get paid less for the same job, they also have less to inherit. That's what I can tell off the top of my head.
Linguistic differences aren't particularly important since Germany has strongly differing accents anyways. Basically, the East didn't develop different accents due to isolation, it already had them. Economically, the East still lags behind, simply because it didn't develop as well during the time of the GDR, and many businesses and factories collapsed when they had to face capitalism and international markets. Politically, the East votes way more for the far-right populist party AfD than the West. It's hard to say why, and it probably has a multitude of factors, though the feeling of broken promises and generally just bigger mistrust in governments probably plays a major role. Can't say culturally. Have spent some time in the East but not enough to get an accurate perspective on that.
For the linguistics, I think the difference between North and South is bigger.
East German living in Bavaria for some years now, the idea of women staying at home while having small kids and the general idea of female emancipation. In the former GDR, German Democratic Republic, workers were needed due to a lower grade of automatization in the industry. A single income was not enough to support a whole family. Therefore, the women also had to work full-time. The government took care for enough daycares and kindergartens. Women did not get financial support after divorce. So they worked and got educated to qualify for better jobs. So they became independent from a husband's salary because they had their own. This was by no means intended by the government, which consisted almost entirely of men, but it enabled women to care for themselves and even raise kids without a partner. In West Germany, the traditional role model of the male provider and the stay-at-home mom was more popular. This has changed now due to different reasons: altered legislation, economic reasons, and, last but not least, East German women migrating to West Germany.
Germany is a quite diverse country anyway, given various differences in cuisine, accents, etc. That's not only East, West, but also North, South, North/West, North Center, or just a difference already across a hill. For example, what you learn as German at school is actually the regional version of Standard German of the Hanover area, as it's deemed the best, least dialect-influenced German. This doesn't mean that Hanover is without any special things on its own. Like if you order a latte lager in Hanover, you'll get a corn with a very small beer and are expected to drink both at the same time with the same hand so that the drinks are down the same moment. If you order latte lager anywhere else, you won't be understood. Germany was divided only for a few decades, so these accents, cultural habits had been in place before already. A major difference is in politics. The far right as well as, you'll guess it, the left both have their main voters base in former Eastern Germany, while both parties don't play the same big role in the western parts. In turn, the Green Party has a far bigger voter base in the West. The FDP is as well stronger there.
From my experience, there are still a lot of interesting differences in culture, perception, and living circumstances. Somewhat of a difference between East and West is the perception of Russia and America. The East has much more cultural and personal connections to Eastern European countries and Russia due to being bordered to Czechia, Hungary, Poland, and the East being part of the former satellite states of the Soviet Union. Thus, there are a lot of cultural influences and remnants from the East, and you hear much more about Russians partying in Berlin than you hear about Russians partying in Cologne. The West is more centered on American, British, and French connections due to proximity, historic connections, economic connections. Due to this, there may be slight differences in perceptions of Eastern European/Western European plus America, though usually those don't come up often. One extremely fascinating thing to note is that you can still see signs of the former separation up from the air. While West Berlin used modern, white fluorescent light, East Berlin used red. Linguistics-wise, there are only slight differences. As others pointed out, good grief, there are many accents that already existed before. Germany is a hodgepodge of different accents influenced by centuries of cultural history. But also, Western language somewhat tends to be more influenced by French/English language, while the East is somewhat more influenced to incorporate Polish/Russian words. Though again, this is only a slight tendency and may also be influenced by immigration movements across land borders. A thing I learned recently about is that there are a lot more remains of socialism in the East that still exist to this day. There are a lot more Karl Marx streets, Rosa Luxemburg statues, etc. in the East, though as far as I know, any mention of Stalin and Lenin doesn't exist anymore. Chemnitz used to be called Karl Marx City despite Karl Marx being born in Trier, close to France, way in the west, and there is a huge ass-head statue of Marx in Chemnitz. The West on the other hand has more John F. Kennedy streets and references to American politicians as far as I know, most likely as a gratitude sign for economic support by America. But I'd need more factual backup on that. There are a lot of economic differences between East and West. We have a federal commissioner on the East that writes an annual report of how far we're coming along with reunionizing, which basically gets defined as trying to achieve equal living standards, economic development and social standards between East and West, though often with a very Western perspective. According to that news source in German, 2019 report, there are developments going forward, but people in the East still feel like second-class citizens due to everlasting economic differences and lower living standards. There has been a huge debate about economics in recent years, as basically almost valuable production factories, like VW, SAP, gas, are based in the West and almost always have Western CEOs, so when Tesla announced that they're building a battery factory in the East, people's ears perked up. Still, a lot of people say that a lot of Eastern ideologies have been abandoned and overlooked, with many pointing to federally funded day nurseries and a lot more progress in terms of gender equality, which have regressed slightly after reunification because the West had a more old man CEO thinking bad about women capitalist culture. Which of course has become a huge talking point in recent years. There are still a lot of prejudices being exchanged between Easterners and Westerners, and though it definitely changed from open callouts to subconscious prejudice, for the most part, especially with younger generations. The old cliches were that Westerners were ye olde capitalists, greedy people who are responsible for gentrification, while Easterners were those who complained about everything and blamed everything on the Westies. And #X200B. These are just a few tidbits because there is a lot, and I personally myself feel like I don't know everything, or even got everything 100% right here. Feel free to correct, but these were just on the top of my mind. Edit. Confused Chemnitz with Jenna?
In East Germany, studying Spanish in school isn't really a thing. You more likely study French, Russian or Polish. In West Germany, Russian and Polish aren't popular to study in school, many schools don't even offer it as a subject. You more like study Spanish, French or Latin.
I thought it said gamers of Reddit and got confused.
The East is much poorer and no one believes in God there.
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more quality content every day.